young girl pressed her hand onto the magical book. And just like that, the book blazed open and revealed her blessing. Joy burst out of her as she celebrated her win and proudly announced her new power, Sword Master. Then Heist shot in to congratulate her. She practically pushed him to take his turn, and Heist, full of confidence, swore he'd get an unbelievable blessing too, picturing the two of them stepping into even crazier adventures side by side. She said this would push them one step closer to the dream they both cherished, and Heist nodded along, the moment lighting up his mind with old memories. Sasha's face crumpled as she sobbed and shouted for her parents. Quietly, he promised himself together they'd rise into the strongest team ever, and they'd save countless people so nobody would ever have to choke on the same suffering they lived through. The old man yanked him back from his daze and barked that it was his turn. He took that in, then thought hard about it, how God hands out blessings as powers meant for humans. In this world, kids get baptized at 12 and walk away with blessings meant to light up their fate. They couldn't make sense of their blessing at all, until they read the Tome of Blessings, and only then did they finally grasp what they could do so they could use it to chase their shared dream. This was the spark that kicked off their journey. When Heist laid his hand on the book, a blinding glow exploded out, lighting everything up. Pages snapped and fluttered past in a blur until they finally slammed to a stop on the one section he wanted. Confused as hell, the crew checked the heist plan again and demanded Geist explain it. Geist leaned over the book, brow creased as he read the words Weapon Master. He scratched his head, baffled because he had no clue what weapon even meant. Then the real gut punch hit. The guild master didn't know either. Geist figured that since the blessing's secrets were still unknown, Heist wouldn't be able to use it, and Sasha just froze in stunned silence. 2 years later, everything changed. Up in the high mountains, where everything feels dangerously close to the sky. Hai gasped for breath as he hauled a brutal, heavy load, and then a man shouted his name. Reynolds, the sacred vice leader, clocked it instantly. They were right on the edge of their destination. Hai swore he could keep going with zero problems. Reynolds nodded, but Sasha, watching in silence the whole time. They let out a heavy sigh and swore they'd hunker down right here, then roll out again in 30 minutes. Heist tried to blurt out a protest, claiming he could still keep going, but she snapped him down fast, because if he crashed, nobody would be there to back him up. If anyone else had to haul that baggage while still gearing up for combat, things would have turned grim fast, and Heist had zero reason to argue. Hayazala tried to smother her grin at Heist's audacity, even though he still didn't have her blessing yet. Then Robin cut in, stepping up to help lug the supplies. And then pushed Sasha to give her the green light. Sasha snapped back and refused Robin's offer, flat out saying she couldn't allow it, because their current assignment was the make-or-break reason Team Sacred could even climb in ranking, and its importance was impossible to ignore as the Sacred leader. Sasha snapped that Robin was their archer and they couldn't risk making this mission any harder for her. Robin froze mid-step, torn between charging in and trusting Sasha's logic, while Heist just flashed a grin and thanked her, swearing he could handle at least this much. And Sasha told Heist to rest. He obediently nodded along, but inside he swore. 2 years had already passed since he'd received that blessing, and in that time he'd built a team with Sasha and watched their crew grow strong. While Reynolds kept sniping that Heist just hadn't learned to use his blessing yet, and Piazzala teased him for being so kind. The Heist didn't slow his thoughts. He clocked that Sacred was sitting at B rank right now, while Sasha's personal rank had already climbed up to A rank. Meanwhile, Reynolds couldn't use his blessing either, so all he could do was haul their luggage around as frustration clawed at him. He clenched his fist and seethed, but Reynolds put a hand on his shoulder and urged him to shake it off, take a breather and rest, and Reynolds's kindness let Heist thank him. Reynolds strode up to Sasha and she blurted the first thing on her mind, how Heist was doing, so Reynolds told her Heist looked completely wiped out, but somehow still believed he'd pull it off. Reynolds pressed her for an answer, and Sasha's whole body snapped tense for a split second. Before she even opened her mouth and answered, she had. At last, the crew finally reached their target, and the moment the Heist site came into view, he studied it with shaking, high-stakes anticipation. This was the lair of the A-rank Queen Cobra, and their mission was simple: break it and bring it under their control. Sasha sketched out the plan. She'd charge in first and square up to the monster herself, while Tycoon and Robin stayed right behind her, ready to back her up. Reynolds took the rear and Piazzala stayed locked in the back, ready to heal anyone who needed it. Heist snapped, asking where he even fit into the plan, but Sasha cut him off and ordered him to stay exactly put, teeth clenched, frustration blazing in his face. Then Sasha flashed the signal and their operation kicked off. She called out for Tycoon to fire up his support magic, because certain blessings let people tap into a blazing power called magical energy and use it to cast spells. With the Tycoon's blessing in hand, Sage could finally use magic beyond healing. His real gift was support spells, and once everything was ready, Sasha marched the whole team into the dungeon. Inside, she chopped off the Queen Cobra's tail in one savage strike, sending the furious creature whipping around with a venomous hiss before it rockets straight at her. Sasha stood there perfectly composed, like nothing could shake her. She lifted her sword, ready to slam the final blow, and Heist just stared, stunned again like it never got old. Sasha's blessing, Sword Master, turned her into something unreal. As long as she gripped that blade, her power kept surging, and her deadly sword techniques came alive. And her biggest edge, she could unleash magical energy at will, powering her sword and her shield like they were made for war. Her blessing was one of the legendary 16 master blessings known to exist. Queen Cobra unleashed yet another vicious strike. Suddenly, someone popped up right behind Robin. Reynolds lunged and snapped it out of the air at the last second, shouting his defensive move as it came. Hayatala fought back a laugh and teased their shield master, saying it was wild that even as their shield, he still let the enemy close in like that. Reynolds groaned in pure frustration. Meanwhile, Heist, drowning in panic, muttered under his breath, and right when his thoughts started to spiral away, Reynolds blared a warning as the Queen Cobra launched straight for him. Right before it swallowed him whole, the monster got ripped in half. Heist froze in shock, stunned by how everyone reacted. He whipped around and saw the defeated creature there, and he froze in shock. Then he blurted out an apology, thanked Sasha for saving him, and tried to explain himself, saying he'd wanted to. Just as he tried to speak, Sasha snapped him shut, scolding him for stirring up trouble and barking orders for him to stay right where he was. Heist froze in stunned silence. Sasha kept her eyes on the monster still standing. Reynolds shouted that human bones were scattered everywhere, and Tycoon demanded they snatch up as many as they could and haul them back to the guild. Heist demanded what they should do with the other materials, but Sasha snapped, "Leave them, focus on the Queen Cobra's core." They only needed that piece to prove the subjugation, and right then, Heist spotted something that didn't look right. He muttered, baffled, as he stared down at the book he'd just stumbled onto. Hayazala snapped, telling him to quit wasting time and start packing, so Heist, startled out of his skin, shoved the cores into the bag and apologized as he bolted. Back in town, the whole crew dropped off the chaos, and Heist slid up by the window, thumb flicking through the strange book he'd snagged, staring hard at the unfamiliar characters and the weird picture on the pages, totally baffled. That weird sense of mystery hit him hard, like it was taking him right back to the day he got his blessing. He figured he'd have to decode it inch by inch. Maybe this was the missing key that would finally unlock the power buried in his blessing. Right then, Sasha burst into the room and shouted his name, and Heist shot up so fast his chair nearly scraped the floor, ready to talk, explaining that he'd been mulling it all over. Sasha snapped back and told Heist to get out of the team, and the whole world felt like it stopped. Heist just froze in shock. He snapped, "How can you say that? What happened to our promise?" And then the real fear hit. Had she just forgotten? Sasha shot back that she hadn't forgotten, then warned that Sacred was about to get bumped up to an A-rank team, and once he did, he'd drag the rest of them down. She vowed she'd go straight for the top and turn them into the best team. Then she slammed a bag of coins down on the table. He launched the Heist plan right when he got back home. Heist's jaw clenched hard, and Reynolds cut in, throwing out apologies as he stepped forward and saying, they swore they'd push Sacred's name so far it finally echoed back to Heist's hometown, and with that, they gave Heist's shoulder a reassuring pat. Heist asked, voice low, if there really was zero room for him on the team, and Reynolds cut him off with a blunt no there was. Hearing that ironclad answer, Heist shut his mouth, then smirked that Reynolds was probably dying to get rid of him. Reynolds looked totally baffled, but Heist just shot a glance at Sasha and kept going, saying the truth was because Reynolds. Right when he was about to finish, Robin snapped out of nowhere and shouted that she was sure of it. She truly didn't want Heist to walk away. Then she insisted, his blessing isn't just any blessing, it's a master blessing too, and even though they didn't know what Heist was a master of yet, Reynolds still caught the moment Sasha's fist started trembling. He snapped Robin's attention away and demanded when she thought this day would finally arrive. And from that moment on, their fights weren't just getting harder, they were about to become brutal. Robin locked eyes with him, totally thrown off by that rare, strange vibe. Then Reynolds stepped in with a hard, unwavering declaration. Heist can't stay anymore. And he was officially cutting him from the team. Heist's eyes popped wide and for a beat he just froze. Just before he could even say he understood, Heist snatched the book and rushed for the door. Then Reynolds shouted that they had a parting gift, and Heist shot back instantly that he didn't need a thing. Reynolds pushed forward and tried to shove the bag of coins into his hands, but Heist snapped his arm back and swatted it away, yelling he didn't need a thing. Then the bag crashed onto the floor and the whole room went dead quiet. Heist snapped that he was walking out, but he'd never ever let his dream or his fight go. He snapped that he'd never become an adventurer like Sasha, someone who tosses the weak aside just to climb higher. Sasha's eyes flashed wide at what he said. Heist swore again he'd never quit. Then he slammed the door behind him and the whole room froze in stunned silence. Sasha bent to grab the scattered coins and Reynolds called out to her. And she rushed to apologize for putting him through something like that, but Reynolds swooped in, helped her scoop up the fallen coins and waved it off, then pressed her, asking if she really meant to let things end this way. Sasha insisted she was certain, saying she never wanted Heist to die, so this was still an acceptable outcome, even if it meant Heist would burn with hate toward her for it. Reynolds nodded and said he finally got it. 2 months rolled by and Heist hissed through his teeth, wincing as he pressed his bruised arm. Every touch screamed with pain. He let out a hard-thought smile. He'd wiped out 20 goblins in a single day. That was his best showing yet, but he knew the real fight was still ahead. He had to get way stronger. The moment he stepped into the guild, a bunch of guys shot him looks and whispered like they were already sizing him up. They said, "Wait, that's the same guy who used to be part of the sacred crew." Someone shot back, "Is he the one they kicked out?" And when another voice confirmed it, they laughed. "Yeah, now he's just out gathering herbs." Then the punchline hit, "But don't sleep on him, Heist is still an adventurer and he runs solo too." Another muttered that Heist was the disgrace of Team Sacred and that maybe Sasha and the others had just stopped caring about him. Hearing it, Heist clenched his fist so hard it looked like he might break. Right when he pushed deeper inside, the same familiar face slipped in at that exact moment. Heist and Sasha froze on the spot, and the moment their eyes locked, both of them were hit with pure shock. Sasha quietly called out Heist, but Heist completely shut everyone out and kept striding forward. Sasha shouted for him to listen, and Heist flinched before he could even think. Sasha told him that south of here, near Dazara, the desert nation down in the wetlands, white clover was blooming, the same kind people used to brew healing potions. She said that was all she had to say before she and the others took off, and afterward Heist just stared into it all, white clover blooming in the wetlands. Those ingredients were pure gold, worth a fortune, and that hit him like a punch. Was Sasha and the rest really watching his back? Then it has to be Sasha. He halted mid-step, clenching the strap of his bag like it might vanish, and muttered that it was a long haul, but he pushed the decision in his head. He'd go there tomorrow. The very next morning, Heist froze in shock when he saw the wetlands spilling over with bright white clover blooms. No hesitation, he started grabbing them right away, and as he worked, he couldn't shake the thought that they might be on their own now, even if they used to stand as one team. He needs to say thank you, at least once, because maybe, just maybe, their shared dream can still come true one day. Suddenly, Heist felt someone behind him. He whipped around so fast it startled him, and the instant he looked, the whole scene seemed to darken for no reason. His voice cracked as he stared up at the giant monster hanging over him. Moments from striking, Heist's eyes blew wide with pure shock. The monster slammed out a thunderous roar, freezing Heist in his tracks with pure shock. He swore he had to break free, but his knees started shaking out of nowhere, total panic hitting without warning. The creature shot forward and raked its claws across his face, and the Heist screamed as hot blood spilled from the cut. The monster struck again and launched him through the air, crashing him hard into a huge stone, impact rattling his body until blood spilled from his mouth as he choked out a weak cough. Heist couldn't shake the thought, was this really the dragon's bathing ground, or was someone yanking his chain, and why did Sasha send him here in the first place? The guildmen's voices kept crashing through his head, calling him the Sacred's disgrace, like Sasha and the others had just decided they didn't want him around. Heist leaned in and whispered Sasha's name, wondering if he'd really been nothing but a burden to her. Then the dragon lunged forward, growling louder as it crept closer. Heist exploded into desperate screams. He kept saying over and over that he refused to die, his voice cracking with pure, shaking terror. Suddenly his eyes locked up in sheer terror. The book stuffed in his bag started blazing with light, and its pages began flipping like they were possessed, faster and faster, until the Heist kid was left totally stunned and lost. Right there, on that exact page, the motion slammed to a halt. Then when Heist tapped it, a glowing gun burst out of the book and landed in his hand, and without even thinking, he instantly knew how to use it. He just had to pull the trigger to unleash a special power made for this weapon alone. So Heist kept his cool and waited for the perfect second, right as the dragon slammed out of the sky with a ferocious roar. He raised the gun, convinced that one shot could end it. He yanked the trigger, blam, and the bullet tore straight into the dragon's gaping mouth. A colossal explosion ripped through its skull. Heist went stone still while chunks of the dragon's flesh smashed down around him, and then he muttered, "Weapon master," like it was a secret only he could hear. Yeah, that was his blessing. He stared down at the book and the truth hit. This weapon he summoned wasn't from this world. The gun slipped from his grip, faded away inch by inch, and then vanished completely. Heist stared into his empty palms, then out of nowhere he erupted into laughter. Sasha shattered his trust and betrayed him to the core. And he swore he'd never, ever forget it. At the Adventurers Guild, Reynolds and Piazzala basked in the cheers as they finally hit a rank, and they wasted no time thanking Geist. Geist leaned in and asked how Heist was doing, only for Sasha to freeze mid-step before she demanded, "Why do you want to know?" Geist didn't beat around the bush. He said nasty rumors have been flying around about Heist lately, and Sasha just stared back, totally baffled. What kind of rumors? Jace said everyone was ganging up to mock Heist for refusing to quit being an adventurer, and even worse, rumors flew that Sasha had tried to sabotage him. The second the accusation hit, Sasha and Reynolds both snapped with a sharp flinch. Sasha snapped and demanded whether Geist truly thought they'd ever pull something like that on Heist, and Geist swore it was nothing but a rumor. The more their team blew up in fame, the more envy would snap onto someone like Heist, the old member, yet he swore they'd never lay a hand on Heist. Geist kept going, telling Sasha that Heist was still locked in on his childhood dream, and right now he was just grinding, saving every bit of money to make it real. Sasha nodded and said she just filled Heist in on a great spot for gathering herbs. Geist demanded the exact location, and Sasha pointed him toward the road leading straight to the desert nation of Dazara. In those tiny wetlands, the moment he heard it, Geist went stone still. Then he snapped, slammed the table, and shouted in pure alarm. Sasha just stared at him, totally baffled. Geist snapped that the spot she named was the lair of an SS+ rank monster, the Black Ancient Dragon's own bathing grounds, and Sasha's eyes went wide with pure shock. Right then, a receptionist slammed into the room, shouting. Geist slammed down an urgent call for the guild master to come downstairs at once, and when he said he was already on the move, he barked that Sasha and the others had to follow, so they nodded, then dashed out fast with him. But the second they arrived, they froze, because what they saw left them completely stunned. Heist loomed right in front of them, and Sasha erupted in pure shock. Heist stared at her with ice-cold rage, smugly thinking she must have hated him enough to try, only for her plan to collapse, and for him to survive. Then he slayed the dragon right there. Still dazed, Sasha tried to ask what he meant, but Heist snapped, cutting her off and screaming that she better not pretend she didn't know. For a second he even admitted he'd felt happy, convinced she was cheering him on. But he was done trusting anyone. With his own power at his command, he'd rise to become the strongest of them all. Sasha lunged to speak, but Heist suddenly staggered, crumpled to the ground, and the whole crowd went dead silent in sheer shock. Then Sasha snapped back to reality, panicked, and blurted Heist's name like her world was ending. 2 years later, everything's changed. In the end, Heist shot up from his seat and handed the old man the payment. He told him straight up that he'd be sticking around for one more whole month. Breakfast was covered, and now an S-rank adventurer called the Harbinger of Darkness. Heist stayed cool while the innkeeper stared at him, hooked on curiosity, and the old man went on to say that, since Heist was S-rank, he could have paid for way nicer inns instead of getting stuck in some rundown dump like this. Heist picked this spot on purpose, knowing nobody would ever guess an S-rank adventurer would actually linger here, and the old man just nodded like he finally got it. Then Heist's gaze slid straight to the newspaper sitting on the counter. The headline blared that Brynhild, the Silver Valkyrie, had finally hit S-rank, and suddenly their clan was getting swarmed by fresh applicants. Heist stared in silence at Sasha's picture, then snapped his eyes shut and stepped out of the inn. At the Adventurers Guild, Heist barged in and demanded to know what Geist wanted from him. Then Geist shot him a brutal glare and finally let out a heavy, tired sigh. He heard Heist had wiped out an S+ mithril ogre all by himself, And that story made the room buzz. Heiss just scratched his face, chuckling in awkward honesty, while Geist hammered the point that Heiss had done it alone. Heiss claimed Geist had trained him for that, but Geist snapped back with pure irritation, saying he'd never taught him anything even close to that. Right then, Heiss stared at the monster rankings, the whole scale that judged a monster's true power from F, the bottom, all the way up to SSS, the theoretical top tier. But here's the catch. Nobody had ever confirmed a real SSS monster, because the highest rank anyone had ever actually seen was SS. Geist snapped that if Heiss could carve monsters cleaner, he'd squeeze out way more valuable materials. Then Heiss fired back that even with his blessing, that kind of precision just wasn't possible. Geist shoved his hand into his pocket, yanked out a letter and thrust it into Heiss's hands, an invite to the S-rank adventurer ceremony, but Heiss stared back, utterly baffled because that ceremony had already happened. Geist finally cleared it up. Those ceremonies before were just the guild's own show. This time the invite didn't come from them at all, it landed straight from the royal family. Heiss read the letter, totally baffled, like, why would the crown throw a ceremony for S-rank adventurers? Geist told us the first king invented the whole idea of adventurers, and then became history's very first S-ranker, so. The royal family ran the whole S-rank classification, and during the ceremony Heiss got an official S-rank request dropped in his lap. Until he finished it, no one would officially call him an S-rank adventurer. Still, Heiss just muttered S-rank, like it was nothing, even though he'd already been taking missions higher than that, like going toe-to-toe with the mithril ogre. Geist casually tossed in like it slipped out of nowhere that Sasha was coming to the ceremony too, then Heiss snapped stiff as a board. Geist's grip cinched tighter around the letter as he demanded, "Do you still can't forgive her?" And Heiss snapped back, "I can't, forgiveness is out of reach." Geist kept repeating the same words he'd told Heiss a dozen times already, and Sasha had yanked him out of the team, because she cared about him so fiercely she refused to let him get hurt. Heiss snapped back that if her words were truly born from kindness, she wouldn't have slashed him with comments so brutal, telling him to get out of the way, and insisting he was weighing the whole team down. Geist swore she couldn't possibly mean any of it for real, but Heiss snapped back that it didn't matter what she intended, she still tossed him aside. He hesitated, then finally admitted it. He wasn't fighting her idea about cutting ties with the weak, because in his gut, that was exactly how they'd forge into the strongest team. He'd keep marching his own road, grinding forward until he finally became the strongest. He refused to trust a single soul, wouldn't lean on any so-called comrade, and didn't need them one bit. With that hard, final declaration, Heiss snapped that he was gone for good, and once he stomped out, Geist sagged and let out a tired, defeated sigh. Mumbling that even with all his raw power, Heiss still had the heart and the age of a kid. Months later, on the very day the adventurers were sworn in, that grand hall erupted in dazzling light as the king thundered the names of the brand new S-rank crew, and Heiss stepped up with icy composure while Sasha did the same. Both of them dropped to their knees before the 13th king, Barbaros, as he declared their formal royal requests for the kingdom of Hybelk. At his command, Cress and Muin surged forward. First, Prince Muin ripped the decision from the air and announced Sasha's mission. She had to crush the crystal golems that suddenly spawned in the crystal mines south of the kingdom, and he was strapping in beside her for the whole fight. Sasha took the assignment with a solemn, heart-stopping respect. Muin cleared her throat, then launched straight into the heist mission. He was sent east into the forest kingdom of Ikdora, marching straight toward the sacred mountain of Gagasia to harvest eternal moon grass, the key ingredient for crafting spirit elixirs. She practically sparkled as she insisted she'd tag along with him too, and he accepted her request right away, sending Muin into a silent, fist-pumping celebration at the idea of her first real adventure. But Geist went on and flatly said he couldn't let Her Highness come with him, so his refusal hit Muin, the prince, Sasha, and the whole crowd like a punch, while Geist just pressed his fingers to his temple, stewing in silent frustration. Muin snapped, demanding to know why they were shutting her out, while Heiss blurted that Gagasia was swarming with lethal monsters, and if they tried to shield her, the mission's success rate would nosedive to about 80%, with her life hanging in the balance too. Muin screamed back, still not buying it. Had that number even been calculated with a whole team's power in mind? Heiss shot back that he worked solo, then faced the king head-on and demanded, straight up, that he be allowed to take the mission without the princess. To everyone's shock, the king burst into uncontrollable laughter. He admitted that bringing a royal to ride alongside a rising S-rank adventurer was meant to send a powerful symbol, but this was the very first time anyone had ever shot it down. He told me he'd heard all about Heiss's crazy legend, how he kept clearing S-rank missions solo again and again. After a heartbeat, he caved and agreed to bend the rules, while Mewing exploded in protest, swearing this was supposed to be her very first adventure, until the king shut her down mid-sentence. He barked at her to drop the thought, then Mewing pouted, furious that he wouldn't back down. With a slow clap, the king sealed the ceremony and wrapped up the official part. And then he kicked things off by flipping the whole vibe into a laid-back dinner hangout. Soon after, the tables groaned under a mountain of food, and the king burst into hearty laughter as he talked with Geist, bragging that the heist was something truly out of this world. Geist admitted he'd feared Heiss might snap like this, but he never expected it to explode right in the middle of a royal ceremony. Then the king's attendant added that if Geist hadn't warned them ahead of time, things could have turned into total chaos. Geist bowed with a sincere apology over the princess's mess, and the king brushed it off like, "None of this concerns me." The arrow pointed straight at the dining floor, and the king clocked it. Mewing was already moving toward Sasha. Still clinging to her dream of riding alongside an S-rank adventurer, Mewing burst in with loud energy, introduced herself and begged Sasha to let her tag along, only for Sasha to hesitate. Cress snapped at Mewing for acting selfish, and Mewing shot back that this was meant to be her first adventure, until Cress fired back that she was wrecking things for the honored guests, and then Sasha calmly cut in, promising it was totally fine. When Her Highness wanted to come along, Mewing would gladly let her, so the second Sasha said a word, Mewing's face exploded with joy. She thanked her non-stop and demanded she just call her Mewing. Then the prince chimed in too, inviting them to call him Crest, and from afar Heiss watched in silence, quietly deciding the princess was acting way too childish. His gaze kept snagging on them, and without warning, his memories of the sacred party slammed back into his mind. So when he saw how vividly they clicked, something in him twisted, and he snapped his eyes away fast. He tilted his head up at the night sky and muttered that a drink sounded perfect right now. Then someone called his name. Heiss spun around and froze. There was Geist right behind him, offering a drink, and Geist flat out told him, "I had no clue how tense you were earlier." He didn't see Heist ever saying that to the king. Heist straight up stood his ground and declared he wouldn't allow a royal member to tag along, and then let out a tiny laugh as he apologized, while Geist snapped back that under normal circumstances this would never fly. Yet the king found Heist's attitude downright hilarious, and Heist just chuckled along. Geist swooped in, ruffled his hair, and snapped him back from getting cocky over it, because Heist was heading out solo with nobody there to guard his back. Heist shrugged off the warning, shoved Geist's hand away, and said, "Got it." Geist leaned in and demanded, "So what's the next heist plan? What are we doing?" He told me he planned to keep taking requests while he sharpened his skills, but he admitted he hadn't gotten much farther at all in cracking that ancient book. Now he told everyone his plan was simple: head home, and Geist nodded along as Heist slipped out of the castle. Right as he slipped through the gates, a voice snapped his name. Heist froze mid-move and spun around, and standing there was Sasha. Sasha insisted she needed a private word with him, but Heist shot back that there was nothing left to say. Then her nerves cranked up fast as she blurted that she just wanted to apologize. The moment he said it, the Heist erupted into this sharp, bitter laugh. Then he snapped at her to stop toying with him. Sasha went totally still, frozen in shock by how he reacted. Heist snapped before she could even talk, rage exploding as he demanded to know why she suddenly wanted to apologize now, when she'd had 100 chances to do it over the past 2 years. Not even the day they swore he died. Raindrops started tapping down softly as Sasha tried to shout after him again, but Heist cut her off and said the day after he fainted. They charged out on a brand new mission, ready to risk everything. She never planned to apologize in the first place, and when Sasha tried one more time to talk, Heist snapped, cutting her off and telling her he didn't need it. Everything she said now slipped right past him. Sasha stood frozen, his mind blown. Heist spun away. Sasha panicked and grabbed him with both hands, clinging desperately. She begged for forgiveness, admitting she panicked and did it out of fear, convinced that banishing him was the only way to protect him. She insisted that if she could turn their dream into reality, he'd finally see it, and he'd understand eventually. Heist snapped back coldly, demanding what was even the point of calling it their dream, when she was the only one still living in it. Sasha went stone still, and Heist drove the knife harder. It was her dream, not theirs, so she needed to quit hiding behind him. Tears blurred her vision as Heiss kept talking, claiming his dream now was to become the strongest by his own choice, not by throwing others away. He swore he'd never discard the weak like she'd been, and if getting stronger meant cutting people off, then fine, he'd start alone. No matter what excuse she tried to cling to, she still ripped away the dream they once shared and walked right out on him. He told her, "If you want to become the best team, then go chase it, don't stop just because I'm not in it anymore." His blunt, unforgiving words hit like a hammer, and a heavy silence crashed down between them. Heiss dropped the conversation with a quick farewell, then strode off into the distance. He stormed off and left Sasha alone in the pouring rain, and the moment he turned his back, he knew nothing would ever go back to the way it was. Chapter 3 begins with the description of eternal moon grass, a rare ingredient used in the creation of elixirs. Its defining trait is its luminous glow. It's said to bloom only on the very top of the sacred mountain Gagasia, hidden deep inside the forest nation of Idora. Heiss jolted awake with a loud yawn, and there, hanging right by his side, was his coat. An SS+ masterpiece forged from the hide of an ancient black dragon built to shield him and armor him in one. That item box ring, an elite high-grade piece that traps things in stasis, was stuffed with everything from luggage and water barrels to freshly grilled food, while an ancient book sat there too, a mysterious keepsake left behind by someone unknown, packed with half-deciphered clues about the weapon master. And on top of it all lay his adventurer's card, a magical tool that could also shove money straight into the guild's bank. Later, the Adventurers Guild roared with life. Heiss got the word that the guild master was busy right now, face to face with Sasha. As he slipped away, he quietly started scanning the request board, praying something big was posted, but the top quest was only a beer-rank extermination job, way too heavy to tackle by himself. The girl hurried into the guild, locked eyes with him in one quick, piercing glance, like she caught him red-handed for staring. After a breathless pause, he wondered why elves were supposed to be so rare, and Heiss, still refusing to meet her gaze, admitted they really were. Most of them never left Idora, the forest nation, so this place felt strange and unfamiliar to her. She admitted this was her very first time here, traveling west until she finally hit the central region. She yanked a crumpled adventurer card from her pocket and flashed it, revealing herself as Persia, a B-rank adventurer with nobody backing her up. She stood tall, fearless in her own power, and when Heiss realized her words matched his so perfectly, he couldn't help but notice, especially when she finally asked about him. He flashed his ID in front of her, and the moment she saw it, she knew this guy was an S-rank adventurer. For someone who worked solo, this kind of teamwork was a real rarity, and Heiss shrugged it off like it didn't matter until he learned the truth. He was about to take on a request tied to the forest nation of Ikdora. Prassia's sudden alarm ripped through the air, jolting him out of his thoughts. She instantly realized that blabbing about confidential requests was a terrible idea. Then the receptionist snapped, called out Heiss, and told him the guild master was finally ready to see him. As Heiss hurried for the stairs, Sasha stepped right into his path. The moment she spotted him, she started talking about how he was showing up, sure he'd come sniff around the royal request just like everyone else. Just as she was about to finish, Heiss stormed right past her, no glance, no pause, leaving her frozen in place as he vanished like the wind. In the guild master's room, Geist leaned in and told them an SS+ ranked dragon was said to live on the very top of Mount Gagasia, and even Yggdrasil, one of the 4 great clans, refused to get anywhere near it. The Yggdrasil clan, mostly demi-humans, was steered by the elven hero Ibis, and Geist dug in to explain exactly what clans are. S-rank adventurers banded together to form their own crack organization, made of multiple teams that could run solo, stay out of the guild's business, and still cash in with direct pay. Then Geist shoved a letter of introduction into Heiss's hands. Geist made sure it was meant for the Yggdrasil clan's leader, certain it would pay off, and when Heiss asked if Geist knew the heads of the 4 great clans, Geist grinned, because years of adventuring had forged those connections naturally. With that, Heiss threw himself into departure, and Geist shot back a fierce reminder to be careful as he stepped out. Just outside the royal capital, Heiss strolled in silence, then, out of nowhere, his instincts screamed that someone else was there. A gun burst into his grip and he snapped it up, aiming straight at the source of the disturbance. When silence stretched out, he snapped off a warning shot into the dirt, the impact blasting upward like a shockwave, and his threat stayed razor-sharp in the air until that familiar figure finally stepped into view. Persia let out a resigned mumble that she'd been caught, and Heiss pressed her for why she followed him, so she snapped back that she needed a favor from him, not anybody else. Even after he brushed her off and told her to find someone new, she stood her ground, insisting it had to be him. She then blurted out that she wanted to ride with him to the sacred mountain of Gagasia and begged him to let her tag along until they finally reached it. Then Heist demanded, "So tell me why." Persia leaned in and told him she needed eternal moon grass, no delay, no excuses. The only thing that could save her sister. Even though she had every ingredient she needed, there was no way she could slip into that mountain, because the monster was in heat and staying out of its way was the only rule that mattered. Guns still leveled at her, Heist demanded to know what any of it had to do with him. Prussia shot back that things would play out differently with him in the mix, because once the forest kingdom of Ildora fell under Hybelt's control, and since Heist was carrying a royal request, he was getting into the kingdom without a doubt. Heist froze in shock and demanded to know how she'd somehow gotten all the details about his mission. Persia confessed she'd just trusted her instincts, and Evos blew into the talk right as he was talking to the guild master. Heist froze in silence while she kept begging him to listen, explaining that rescuing his sister all boiled down to one thing: getting to Gagasia. She begged him to let her ride with him at least until they reached the sacred mountain, then made him swear two brutal terms. If she died on the road, he could leave her body behind, and if she actually got the eternal moon grass, she'd hand over every coin she had. Heist didn't answer right away. Eventually, he snapped that her reasons didn't matter to him. Perseus's expression tightened. Yet Heist pressed on, telling her flat out that he didn't care whether she followed him on her own. But he made it crystal clear, they weren't teammates, so if danger hit, she'd have to take care of herself. Percy nodded it off, grinning with total confidence that she'd make it through alive. Heist spun around and kept walking, and she cut in with a confident, "I'm Perseus." Heist stepped forward and he snapped his name into place, then greeted him, only to get back a cold, distant glance in return. Gunfire ripped through the forest's silence, and the monster dropped dead on the spot after a shot slammed straight into its eye. As Heist tore through the last creature, bodies piled at their feet, dead men everywhere, and Prussia couldn't believe the brutal power his weapon just unleashed. And he demanded to know if it was tied to his blessing. Heist said yes. Then Perseus dropped the bomb. Her blessing, the spirit command, let her command spirits that normal people can't even see. That's what let them help her, slipping past detection, hiding her tracks, even listening in from the shadows. Heist finally understood. This was how she'd been tailing him all the way to Gagasia, even though he couldn't see a single spirit with his own eyes. She asked for his blessing, and Heist let out a quiet breath before explaining Weapon Master was his gift, giving him flawless control over weapons that came from another world. Persia pressed him on what another world even meant, but Heist admitted he couldn't fully grasp it either. Right now, he's got 4 kinds of these weapons he can actually use, and more are still locked away from him. He let her reach for the gun, then it vanished the second her fingers brushed it, shouting that only he could wield those weapons. Fed up with the non-stop talk, Heist slammed the moment shut and declared it was time to pitch camp. Night dropped fast and Persia just stared wide-eyed at the stuff inside his Heist item box, shocked that he'd managed to cram all of it in there. Heist told her he'd grabbed the biggest capacity one while he was back in the capital, so Prussia could only stare in envy, saying an S-class adventurer was supposed to be this prepared. Then she leaned in and asked what he was cooking up. Heist didn't answer, he just went quiet and slid her some food instead. Persia doubted he was even right to hand her any since they weren't teammates, but Heist just grinned and said he felt like doing it. He just shrugged it off, no more questions, no extra words. C took one bite and her face lit up with pure delight. She even praised his skills for making the food way more delicious than it had any right to be, and Heist admitted he'd handled the cooking and chores back in the day. After the last bite, Persia shot him a grateful thanks for the meal, and Heist nodded back, quick but sincere. He caught her lingering stare and pressed, "What's on your mind?" Persia confessed she'd built him up in her head as some sharper, more intimidating guy, then Heist snapped whether she was trying to rile him up. She just shook her head and told him she was honestly grateful, and that sincerity left him completely thrown. Pressing her until she finally admitted it, because she followed him, she'd opened the real door to saving her sister. Calm moment finally settled over Persia. She offered to have the spirits stand guard all night as a thank you for the food, told him to finally get some sleep, and Heist felt a sharp wave of nostalgia before he agreed. Next morning, the duo hit the road again until Heist slowed to a stop, totally baffled, and asked what the massive structure up ahead was. Priscilla leaned in and told him that the Yggdrasil clan's heart was this monster of a tree, Yggdrasil, standing tall as the clan's very symbol. Legend says Ibis, one of the 4 sages who ruled the great clans, used their power to forge that very tree. Prasia then laid out the 4 great clans like they were the key to everything. The West clan, trading under the name Fantastic Fantasy, ran the biggest entertainment district on the entire planet. The South clan, nicknamed the Cavern King, ran a massive mining empire, all powered and controlled by dwarfs. The Northern clans, Seyford Holy Knights, only let in adventurers who carried sword-related blessings. And then, right before them, their clan's power stood tall in Yggdrasil, the mighty tree that ruled most of the forest nation of Yggdrasil. At Ictora's main gate, a guard snapped for their documents, and Heist claimed he'd come on a royal order to get into Gagasia. Then the guard's eyes widened when he realized the royal family themselves had sent the request. Heist gestured toward Praja too, even as she fumbled to hide herself, all awkward and tense. Heist shot her a confused whisper, but she shoved him off and begged him to drop it and ignore what she was doing. The guard handed over his entry certificate and Heist snatched it with a grateful nod. Then he dug into his pocket and pulled out Geist's letter of introduction meant for the Yggdrasil clan leader. Guard demanded a look, and the moment he opened it, his whole attitude flipped. Stunned out of his mind, he bolted out, and moments later he came back dragging an elderly man with him. The old man rushed out an apology for making Heist wait, then called him Geist's disciple, only for Heist to answer politely before he could even finish. The moment the words stuck in his throat, the old man seized his arm and barked that he had to come right now because Geist had summoned him. Heist froze, hesitated. Still reeling, she couldn't believe one simple handoff of Geist's letter had spiraled into all this. Then Prussia snapped that she'd stay behind. Then Ibis, the clan master of Yggdrasil, wasn't just some big name. She held more power than Igdora's own royal family, and the old man warned him not to mess that up, pushing the Heist right along anyway. Soon, he found himself staring straight at a strange device he'd never seen before. The old man pointed and declared it was an elevator. Heist snapped the word back like a question. They hesitated, then stepped inside, and the platform jolted upward on the spot. After a quick, dizzying ride, it slammed to a stop and the old man pointed ahead. There, he said it, Heist would hunt down the clan master of Yggdrasil, and that place was Ibis's sacred sanctuary. Chapter 4 begins as the two of them step inside, where a woman stands in the absolute center of the room, owning every eye in the place. She's Ibis, the clan master of Yggdrasil, and she welcomes Heist with open arms as Geist's new disciple. Heist freezes the moment she realizes who she really is. Ibis tells him she's already read Jace's letter. Jace orders her to help Heist, even though she warns that Heist will probably shut her down, and that message rattles him to the core. And Ibis, grinning, realizes Geist nailed Heist to a T, so after she sets her pipe down, she strolls up to him, murmuring that there's something weirdly nostalgic about the way he is, and gunpowder stings the air around him, and when he realizes what she can smell, Heist snaps in surprise, because she's recognizing it too. She drops a bombshell. She used to fight side by side with someone who carried guns. The Heist guy whips out the book and asks if she recognizes it, and the second she lays eyes on it, her whole body freezes in stunned silence. She spots it instantly and grins like she just hit the jackpot. He catches it and realizes it's Nabunaga's diary. Heist freezes in confusion and Ibis jumps in to explain. Nabunaga is an otherworlder, somehow he's fallen into their world. She flips the pages and her face tightens like she's zeroing in on something big. When Heist demands to know if she understands what's written, she snaps the book shut and blurts out the truth: she can't read the script from another world. And Nabunaga never spills its contents to her. She's clueless about what Nabunaga's gun powers really are too. Still, Heist shrugs it off and she immediately asks if he can read it. He says he can, but only halfway. Then when he tries again, he's totally startled when he realizes he can suddenly understand way more of the text than he ever could before. Ibis can't look away from this new twist. She leans in and demands he spill what's inside the diary. As he reads, icy sweat breaks across his skin and he blurts out to her, "Don't take it the wrong way, what you're about to read isn't meant to hurt you." Heist kicked off by reading the diary out loud. How Ibis showed up again, prowling in like a cat and swearing she was the cutest thing alive, and how Nabunaga couldn't wait to shower her with attention that night, only for Ibis to snap with sharp irritation, demanding his focus right then. Then the diary went even further. Nobunaga started wondering if she'd wear cat ears and a tail if he bought them for her, and the thought alone made him grin because it was just too adorable to handle. He even toyed with hunting cat-like monsters just to make the items, and motivation hit him like lightning. Then Heist spilled everything, and Ibis's face flared bright red with pure embarrassment, while Heist blurted that maybe she and Nobunaga had once been lovers. Without a single warning, Ibis snatched a pillow and rocketed it straight at him. She cut the conversation off cold, told Heist to come back another time if he still needed help, and kicked him out so fast the door slammed behind him as he walked away. Heist let out a heavy sigh, stunned by the weird timing. Now he could suddenly read even more of the diary, like the book had a mind of its own, even as he doubted that idea the second the words left his mouth. Later, as the world climbed toward the peak of the sacred mountain Gagasia, Heist told them they were closing in on the summit, and Percy shot back that the fog was swallowing everything, so thick from the height she could barely see at all. Then the ground behind her split with a brutal crack and a monster erupted out of the earth. Perseus shrieked as it lunged straight for her, jaws wide and ready to tear. Leaving her zero time to dodge, Heist snapped his tongue in rage and, in one clean, lightning-fast motion, he unleashed a laser-precise shot, and the monster's flesh exploded open. Blood sprayed as it crumpled on the spot, slain instantly. Prassia froze, stunned stiff. Heist let out a shaky breath. He clocked the thing's dirty trick, using that thick fog to stalk its prey, and he barked at Prassia to keep her guard up. As he called a new weapon into his grasp, Prassia snapped, "Why are you helping me if we're not even teammates?" Heist shot back that she'd made it clear she wanted to save her sister. Her eyes went wide as the truth hit. He'd admitted he didn't have to rescue her, but he also couldn't ignore the chance to help her save her sister. That was it for him. Then he leaned in and told her to see it as payback for every lesson she'd handed him during their journey. Perseus flashed a grateful smile, and Heist shot back a simple reply, like the moment itself was enough. Boom! Thunder cracked through the air like the world just got hit. Heist snapped his eyes up and saw a massive dragon gliding overhead right above them, and Persia immediately figured it had flown out to hunt, meaning the instant to grab the eternal moon grass was now. She didn't hesitate. She burst forward like lightning, and Heist shouted after her, but she swore she'd come right back the moment she grabbed it. He promised he'd hand over the rewards afterward, but Heist screamed for her to stop, because he knew she was straight up underestimating the dragon, and dragons are so ferociously territorial that the second anyone breaches their ground, they come charging back. Suddenly the ground gave way, a monster erupted out of the rubble, and he hissed a curse under his breath. Pure frustration exploded as yet another threat surfaced, then monsters swarmed in from every direction. Meanwhile, Prassia sprinted across the mountains, and the second she hit the grassy plains, she gasped for breath. The place was dead and empty. She spun her gaze around, panicking, begging herself to spot eternal moon grass before the clock swallowed her up, but her search hit the worst truth. The grass was wiped clean, and in that brutal emptiness, despair crushed her. She sank to her knees, sobbing hard, mourning the elixir she'd dreamed of and begging forgiveness to her sister through her grief. Behind her, an SS+ rank monster, an eerie green elephant dragon, burst into view, its thunderous roar rattling the air as Prassia froze solid, locked in its savage stare. The green elephant dragon ripped the sky open with a brutal roar, and Perseus immediately sprang back. She drew an arrow and locked onto her target, betting that one solid hit could spark a real distraction, just enough to slip out and escape. She loosed the arrow and watched it rip through the air, dead set on the monster. But the instant it hit, it just bounced off, did zero damage. A jolt of shock hit her the moment she realized spiritual energy was useless, and without wasting a second, she snatched for another arrow, ready to go for something far stronger. Right before she could move, the monster yanked open its huge jaws and blasted a deafening scream, so brutal it wrecked her senses and drove her to clamp her hands over her ears, screaming in pain. As the chaos died down, the creature snapped its long tongue out like a whip. The monster cinched it tight around her, and that crushing squeeze ripped a pained groan from her throat as it hauled her straight toward its gaping mouth, right when it started to swallow her. A single bullet tore through the air, clipped the creature's tongue, and ripped it clean off. Prassia crashed down, and a violent splash of blood sprayed outward in every direction. But Heist charged in and snatched her up just before she could slam into the ground. He shoved her down hard, his fury blazing clear as day. And he jumped to her side, putting himself right between her and the monster. Heist snapped his attention to the green elephant dragon and tore loose a relentless storm of bullets. Even though their shots hit, they barely scratched the target, proving right away it wasn't enough to finish him. He swapped to a fresh weapon and let loose again, firing hard and fast. Every strike hit like clockwork, slamming the monster back with relentless, unstoppable force. Smoke churned around them as the heist kept blasting with zero mercy, and then, finally, he lined up his aim and fired with total conviction. The bullet hit dead on, and a savage burst of blood erupted from the creature's body. Persia exhaled hard, still unsure if the dragon was truly gone. No way it should have died that easily. Heiss rushed to check her, and Persia shot back that she was perfectly fine. Her voice slowly crumbled into silence. She stared at him, totally thrown off and flustered, baffled that he'd shown up after she told him to wait, while Heist stood there, gasping hard. Perseus' cheeks flared red as the truth hit him. He might have sprinted up the mountain just to save her, while Heist shoved her to leave, grinning grimly because the place was starting to stink, and Perseus could only stammer out that she'd go. Heist stared at her, totally confused, and asked what was wrong. Then she snapped, pointing at the light. He turned, blinked, and realized the plants didn't glow in daylight. Chrysia dashed toward the glow and spotted eternal moon grass. Then, before she could even celebrate, the flower withered right before their eyes. Both of them went rigid with shock. Heist even sucked in a breath, fearing the dragon's blood could have made the blooming patches rot away, and Percy's whole body started to tremble. Devastation hit her when those long-awaited finds looked like they'd been ruined. Then Heist caught her panic and swept the area again. Out of nowhere, he caught something, snapped his finger at it, and told her. Perseus just stared at him for a second, then whipped her gaze where he pointed, and her eyes went wide. She lunged straight for the spot, no second thoughts raking through her bag for her. She gently yanked a surviving eternal moon grass from the earth and sealed it up tight in a jar, then clutching it to her chest, pure relief surged through her. She raced back to Heiss and told him straight up. Since he'd slain the dragon, the reward was his, no debate, no delay. With that eternal moongrass, she was convinced she'd track down more somewhere else, so Heiss inspected the plant and nodded, accepting that the request was finally done. Later, right at the mouth of the mountain trail, someone spotted her and blurted, "Hey!" A whole group surged over, shouting Prassia's name with real respect, while Heiss shot an eyebrow up at the fancy honorific pin to it. A man finally stumbled up, breathless with relief. He'd found her at last. Prassia blinked in shock and whispered, "Adra." Then Adra snapped at her, furious that she'd left only a note and disappeared without a trace. Adra spun to Heiss and demanded, "So you're the S-rank adventurer?" Then she pressed, "Were you the one who escorted Prassia to Gagasia?" Heiss nodded, quick and to the point. Adra told Heiss that Prasia was Queen Alsara's younger sister, the ruler of Idora's forest kingdom, and warned she wasn't someone you could mess with. Heiss just stared, stone-faced. Then Adra pressed Prasia about what happened on her trip, and when Prasia said nothing, he snapped to the only conclusion. She came back with nothing. He said that since she couldn't snag eternal moon grass even from the sacred mountain of Gagasia, she should quit, and Persia exploded in protest, snapping back, "So you want me to watch my sister die?" Adra stayed ice calm and told her he wasn't asking her to give up. He was only stating that Alcira's death was fate. Prassia went speechless, his words hit like a hammer. He declared they'd head home at once and that their marriage still had loose ends to fix. Prassia tried to answer, but the moment she opened her mouth, frustration seized her throat and she clenched her fist hard, while Heiss just kept watching in silence. He slipped the jar of eternal moon grass into her bag without a sound, then gave her a quick, easy wave and started backing away like it was just another normal farewell, casual, but way too careful. Before he charged down the path, deep in the forest nation of Idora, right inside the queen's chamber, Persia burst into tears and confessed to her sister that she couldn't find a single piece of eternal moon grass. Alcira wrapped her in comfort and steadied her trembling heart, telling her it was all just destiny. Alcira's voice hit Persia like a bruise and she whispered her sister's name, hurt by what she heard. Then Alcira smiled softly and asked her to trade tales from her journeys across the western and central lands. Persia wiped her tears, then snapped back to the souvenirs she'd brought. She dove her hand into her bag, and the moment she found it, she froze cold with wide eyes and pure shock. Alcira stared right along with her, utterly stunned, as Persia pulled that jar into the light. She knew it in an instant, eternal moon grass, no doubt. Prassia was hit with everything at once, and he screamed his name like it was a lifeline. A few days later, inside the guild master's office, Geist couldn't believe it. Heist had totally botched the request. Even if the royal family treated the mission like a mere formality, Jace couldn't shake the feeling that it should have worked, especially after Heiss fought tooth and nail to keep the princess from coming along. And the kicker? Heiss just stayed silent. Geist leaned in and demanded what Heiss planned next, and Heiss snapped back that he'd keep doing things the usual way, taking jobs and wiping dungeons clean, so Geist smirked like he knew all along and handed him a fresh assignment. A newly discovered dungeon that needed to be investigated. After their heated talk, Heiss stormed off, then, just as he headed out, someone shouted his name. He snapped his head around and spotted Prasia closing in, so he demanded why she was here, only for her to greet him with a warm, inviting smile. She told everyone she'd cured her sister with the elixir, made possible only because the eternal moon grass he'd secretly handed her. Alcera was well enough to jump back into her royal duties, and Prasia poured out heartfelt gratitude like it could finally fill the emptiness. Heiss leaned in and asked her, "So tell me, what do you want?" Persia told Heiss that her victories earned her total freedom to roam wherever she wanted, and that she'd also cut ties with Adra, breaking their engagement. Then Heiss snapped, demanding her real reason, and Persia finally admitted she just wanted to repay him somehow. She made it crystal clear, no comrades, no teammates, but if he wanted someone to talk to, she'd happily ride along as his go-to listener. Heiss cut past her without a pause, brushing off the whole idea like it meant nothing. Percy pouted, but a gentle laugh slipped out of her. She sprinted after him and demanded to know if he'd at least share a meal. Then she pointed to a nearby cafe, promised to cover the tab, and still Heiss didn't give her a word. Just a few days back, the party finally pulled everyone together. With everyone finally gathered and ready to take on the royal order, Sasha slammed the moment into motion and declared they were going to crush the crystal golem. At the crystal mines, everyone packed in front of the cave entrance while Sasha laid out the plan, because they had to crank up their attack power and tear right through the crystal golem's hardened body. Cress kicked off the whole scheme by using his double ability to whip up a perfect duplicate of Sasha. Then Meween would pour explosive power into the arrows and Robin would loose them, right on target. The moment the arrows landed and hit the golem, Sasha surged in for the follow-up assault, leaning on the others to back her up. Deep inside the mines, Robin's eyes lit up at the sheer beauty of the place, until the tycoon dropped the truth. Mining here was allowed only to scrape out tributes for other nations, the ore was top tier, and anyone who dared take it without permission would be executed on the spot. Sasha stared at that strange glow inside the cavern while Tycoon swore the deeper ores were rumored to be even more exquisite and cleaner than anything on the surface. Robin suddenly spotted something up ahead, snapped the group to attention, and confirmed it was a crystal golem. He counted 7 of them, and even then, something in the air felt seriously off. 5 golems swept through the mines, patrolling like clockwork soldiers, while 2 more kept watch by the processing area at the back. Their movements were unnervingly perfectly synced, and Tycoon snapped that this wasn't normal. Golems were usually just simple monsters, twisted from ore or stone, not something that moved like a choreographed unit. Reynolds had no higher awareness to lean on, so he whirled toward Sasha, and she immediately drew her sword to guide him. They stick to their plan, no hesitation, and the moment it's decided, Cress fires off his double spell on her right away, planting a whole second Sasha right next to the original. Meween pumped the arrows full of explosive power, and Robin launched them like a thunderous strike, hurling them straight into the golems and sending a shockwave of bodies flying. When everything slammed into place, explosions detonated like thunder, scorching the air in a storm of chaos. Through the smoke, Sasha hurled herself way above the monsters, ready to strike. Sasha and her double sprint straight at the enemies, and with perfect timing their blades whip out in silver arcs. Then they unleash the Lotus Strike, carving through a golem and shattering it on the spot. More golems slammed in from every direction, but those 2 Sashas kept snapping and striking in perfect rhythm. Down goes one after another until the last golem crumbled into stone rubble. As soon as the battle ended, the others closed in and Sasha flashed a nod like it was over for good, while Piet Zola stared in stunned awe. Sasha stared at the sheer power of his double ability, and Cress snapped the truth. Once he copied something, he couldn't duplicate that exact target again for a whole day. Sasha's jaw dropped. She sensed something sinister lurking deeper within and prayed she could tap that same power again. Reynolds pressed her and she shot back that she meant it, then warned that what she felt didn't have the vibe of a crystal golem at all. Whatever it was, it already knew they were there. Even though it wasn't in their official request, they couldn't just brush it off. Sasha snapped to everyone that they'd better stay on guard as they pushed forward. They slipped into the tight passage toward the crystal processing area, every step cautious. Then a voice snapped out, saying they'd felt him and closed in. Sasha couldn't take the hints anymore. She demanded to know his name, and the man straight up called himself Crane, a demon, no less. The tycoon snapped back in stunned silence, his mind scrambling to understand how a demon could even step foot in the human realm, and then he explained it all. Demons were a whole race that once waged a brutal war against humans back when history was still fighting. That war didn't stop until one man finally unleashed his power and split the entire continent in two. Half became the human realm, the other half crashed into the demon realm. Nobody should have been able to slip between those two realms, so Crane's presence felt impossible by every rule anyone knew, yet Crane nodded to Tycoon's understanding and teased just how dangerous demon power really is. Tycoon snapped at Sasha that they had to break free right now, then Sasha just stared, confused by his wild reaction. Tycoon reminded her that during the Great War the demons had only been a few thousand, but they still smashed back human armies tens of thousands strong, proving just how brutally unstoppable each demon was. Crane lit up with satisfaction at the praise, then declared, "You're all getting out of here unharmed for today." And he made it clear they owed that mercy to the Tycoon. He told her he already had the high-purity crystals he'd come for, and when Sasha demanded to know why he was collecting them, the silence felt like a challenge. He brushed her off, saying she wouldn't get it no matter how he tried, then warned everyone to stay out of his way before he had to smash through them, while Sasha's face turned cold at the cutthroat words. Crane sneered that humans were like helpless insects, crawling toward treasure no matter what. In the next heartbeat, the crystal in his grip split clean in two. He just froze, stunned out of his mind, staring at Sasha, the one who caused it, and barking what she thought she was doing. Sasha lifted her sword and swore she'd act on what was happening. Some sneaky intruder slipped into Highbelk Kingdom, and she wasn't there to negotiate, she was there to hunt everything down. Tycoon blared an alarm, but Reynolds cut him off fast, reminding him that mining without permission meant execution. At the same time, Robin ordered Mewing to fire up her explosive arrows again, while Piet Zola's rage boiled, sparked by Crane's earlier insult aimed at Sasha. The Tycoon let out a heavy breath, then unleashed a strength-enhancing spell, and Crane watched it with wide eyes, stunned by how fascinating it was. In a snap, Sasha bolted straight at him. Crane stayed frozen in place, watching her charge closer, then opened his mouth as she finally closed the gap. Crane snapped that Sasha's powers were nothing, trash compared to a demon's strength. He snapped his fingers and Sasha slammed hard into the stone wall, pain ripped out of her in a sharp breath as Pietzola lunged toward her in full panic. Sasha snapped her fingers and cast a healing spell on the spot. Her wounds faded fast as she sprang back to her feet. Then, out of nowhere, Crane slipped in behind Pietzola. He's dead set on taking her first, his sharpened nails whipped toward her eyes. Reynolds snatched the attack out of thin air at the last second, refusing to let Crane touch her. Then everything stopped cold, because he suddenly felt the space around them tearing and spinning into pure violence. Wind tore through the scene like it had a mind of its own, whipping in unnatural spirals. Then Crane smirked, clocked Reynolds' stunned reaction, and flat out admitted it. This was his power, total control over the wind. The moment they hit the ground, the carts shattered and burst upward into the sky. Weightless as he spun inside a tornado-like vortex, Crane lit up the battlefield with his skill, bragging that one storm from him could wipe an entire town off the map. Then he swore the power of demons was on a whole other level, miles beyond what ordinary humans could ever touch. Sasha planted her feet, admitted his power was terrifying, and still snapped back that crushing them took more than raw strength, because battle wasn't decided by force alone. She took a breath, ready to prove it, and Crane scoffed, mocking her as if she couldn't possibly do a thing. At that exact moment, an arrow slammed into him, then boom, an explosion tore the air apart. Shock snapped into Crane's eyes as he spotted one of Robin's arrows tucked in among the stuff he'd yanked up with the wind, and a wicked grin snapped across his face. Right as he shouted he was coming back for another strike, his raging wind whipped the arrows right off the ground, and sent them crashing back toward their whole group. When they crashed into each other, boom, explosions lit up everything, debris flew in every direction and choking smoke swallowed the air. When the smoke finally drifted away, everyone was still standing, unhurt. Reynolds took the hit head-on, soaking up the entire blast with his shield. Crane froze in pure disbelief like his body couldn't move fast enough, and Sasha snapped into action. She launched high into the air, declaring that her own power might not be enough to overpower him alone. Their unity forged a strength none of them could have ever reached alone. So when she swung her blade, she drove it down and carved a brutal slash across Crane's body. He crumpled onto his knees as blood poured out from the deep wound. Sasha stood right in front of him, proclaiming that this victory proved what teamwork could truly do, while Crane ground his teeth and the air around him erupted into a savage storm. Rage swallowed him whole as he roared a deadly threat, swearing he'd wipe out her friends, her loved ones, and the whole country she held dear. Then he swore he'd end her too, and with that last chilling promise his body vanished into nothing, disappearing completely. Sasha narrowed her eyes, watching the last traces of him disappear into nothing. In Halbelk Kingdom's royal castle, where secrets breathe in the shadows, Sasha ran to the king and told him the truth. The entity had introduced himself as Crane, a demon, and it looked like he was up to something sinister, and the king simply nodded along. Then he called in Cress and Mewing and demanded their side of the story, and they answered right away. The king praised the sacred crew for nailing the request, and Sasha thanked him for the kind words. The king admitted that Heiss bungled his own task, but Sasha's team crushed theirs with zero problems. Then Sasha froze in shock. The king snapped his attention to the reward and demanded to know exactly what they wanted most. Sasha stepped up and demanded a clan home for the whole group, and the king gave a straight-up yes on the spot. Minister Bonnet admitted he'd seen this coming and he'd already lined up a bunch of options for them to pick from. Just then, a maid came in and brought the documents. The minister ushered them in and told them to pick the residence that fit their hearts, and the whole group practically exploded with excitement. Robin's eyes sparkled as she tore into one option, thrilled by the massive bathroom, while everyone else crowded around the homes. Sasha sidestepped the chaos and went straight to Minister Bonnet to thank him, but he waved it off like it meant nothing. Then Sasha snapped the conversation to Heist's failure. The minister only smiled like he already knew and asked if she wanted the truth. Sasha stays stone still as Minister Bonnet steps in and declares that Igdora's report proves it. Heiss really did pull off the impossible and snag one eternal moon grass. But when Heiss heard Queen Alcera was gravely ill, he shoved the rare herb into the hands of her younger sister, Praja. Sasha snapped with shock as the minister admitted that, yeah, Heiss technically missed the mark, but because he saved someone from the Igdora royal bloodline, the family's gratitude was absolutely massive. Queen Alcera even wanted to reward him herself, but Heiss flat-out refused. Robin burst into the talk and joked that selfless heists were basically his thing, then pushed hard with a question about what Prasia has been doing lately. Minister Bonnet said Praja didn't come back, she left Ghidorah to keep adventuring, and from what he heard, she's out there right now traveling with Heiss. Robin's jaw dropped, and Sasha was stunned right alongside him. The rumor hinted that Heiss could be teaming up with Praja. Meanwhile, in the guild master's room, Heiss, Geist's own words hit him like a hammer, went totally speechless when he learned he'd been ordered to rest. Geist snapped that their quest to crack the top-tier dungeon was over, and when everyone told him it was done, he erupted in disbelief, because they had barely made it to the 60th floor. Geist made it clear that floor 60 and everything past it was still off-limits, for now, and then announced they were opening things up with a wider call for adventurers. Next, a receptionist handed Heiss back his adventurer card. Heiss tried to press for any other dungeons or higher-tier requests, but Geist shut it down fast. None were available at the moment. He told Heiss to actually take a real break, like rest mattered as much as work, because at 16 he still had his youth to enjoy, yet Heiss muttered rest like it didn't fully compute, and Geist swooped in with a wild suggestion. Try a date for once. Heiss shot it down instantly, saying he wasn't interested and didn't have anyone in mind. Geist hit him with Praja's name, and it made Heiss nearly choke on his drink. Heiss swore she came along willingly like it meant nothing, then Geist erupted into laughter and told him he was just kidding. So Heiss kept silently rolling the word joke over and over in his head before Geist casually steered the conversation to Heiss' love of books. And they shoved a recommendation right into his hands. Heiss snatched the paper Geist thrust into his hands, scanning the listing for a used book market in the old commercial district of Lausanne, the royal capital of Heilbelg, and Geist told him how Eloberia, the city soaked in literary culture, throws an annual market where he might actually dig up rare books, making his brand new free time feel like money well spent. Heiss stared at the paper in stunned silence, then slipped away only to find Priscilla waiting outside, clocking his plan to hit the used book market. Heiss blinked in mild shock, then muttered that she was at it again, eavesdropping. Persia said that as soon as they got there they could split up. Heiss just shrugged and told her to do whatever she wanted. Later, in the old commercial district, Heiss shot a look over his shoulder, and that's when he saw Prussia vanish into the crowd the instant they stepped in. Her earlier words about wanting to browse a few things still rang in his head. He flicked his eyes up at the signboard and without hesitation headed straight into the bookstore. He slipped inside and scanned the whole place, spotting every kind of item until one specific book snapped his focus. Titled The Adventures of the S-Rank Adventurer, Gerald. Heiss couldn't help wondering if an S-Rank adventurer with that name had ever even existed. Then he decided that for now he'd just check the truth the old-fashioned way. But right as he reached for the book, another hand slammed down on it at the exact same second. Both of them lunged forward, panicking to apologize. But the second their eyes locked, their voices died in their throats. Sasha yanked her hand back and blurted out another apology, but Heiss just shut her down with a cold, simple reply. Then an awkward silence crashed between them. Sasha swallowed her nerves, ready to push on, when a voice she knew instantly shouted her name. Reynolds stepped up and spotted Heiss there too. Like, what? Why was he here? Sasha gave a quick nod. Heiss brushed it off, then asked if the two of them were together, setting off massive "wait, a date" energy from Sasha. Reynolds yanked Sasha into his arms, backed up Heist's guess, and Sasha shot into panic. She tried to stop the confusion and insist hard that they weren't dating. But Persia crashed into the moment out of nowhere, cutting her off mid-sentence. She looked at Heiss and blurted, "Is something wrong?" Heiss froze for a heartbeat, then flashed a small smile and promised, "No, everything's fine." Persia brushed it away and suggested they grab tea, saying she was already wiped out. Heiss clocked that the fatigue had to be from the massive stack of books she was hauling and offered to take a few off her hands. Right before they headed out, Sasha suddenly shouted Heiss. But he cut her off with a quick reply, promised they'd talk later, and then he walked off with Persia. After that, the two slid into a cafe and sat side by side. Prassia suddenly said the mystery person from earlier was Sasha, one of Heiss's old teammates. Heiss didn't answer, no words, no movement, just a cold silence. Persia blurted out that when she was researching Heiss and his crew, she also dug up memories of Sasha, because they'd been childhood friends, and Heiss admitted it was all true, then said none of it mattered to him anymore. Prassia suddenly dropped the indirect talk and hit them with a straight, no-bull question. Heiss said he needed to know, did he actually like Sasha or did he hate her? Heiss snapped back that if she'd really dug into his past, she'd already have the answer. Then he warned that Sasha had almost gotten him killed. Prassia fought back, saying that story wasn't true, but Heiss dug in, insisting that whether it was accurate or not, everything changed for good. There was no going back to how it used to be. Persia snapped quiet, staring off as the thought hit her, had he ever even once tried to fix anything? Meanwhile, in the deepest heart of the highest-level dungeon, Crane snapped with rage, cursing Sasha and roaring out threats like a storm. A dragon roared like thunder nearby, and Crane snapped that he would kill her, no excuses, just a vow to make it happen. A lightning bolt idea hit him, and he immediately started plotting how to kick off a monster stampede. Sasha found the whole thing hilarious, and she couldn't wait to see the look on Sasha's face. He dropped onto the dragon below and taunted it straight to its face, gloating that death was right around the corner. Crane made the threat crystal clear: if it wanted to live, it had to do what it already knew, and that warning slammed into the dragon until it finally caved and submitted. Chapter 8 begins 1 month later. The sacred clan keeps pushing forward, and you can feel it. The moment when the 5 great clans will rise, not 4, is getting dangerously close. Right before the receptionist clocked them standing there, the boy from the team, 1000, let out a massive breath of relief. She snapped around to face them, grinning wide at the sight of the full 1000 team, and announced, right there, they'd just been promoted to D rank. The boy from 1000 soaked up the praise with pride. Then, out of nowhere, his teammates suddenly smashed him with a punch. Who kept reminding him that the victory wasn't his by himself. Still aching, he finally admitted it. Every step forward only happened because the whole crew, Mad, Tenna and Kwa, busted their tails together. Tenor couldn't believe they actually got into the sacred place at all, and the boy just nodded, agreeing. And then Kwa called out the real truth, how shaky and nervous he'd been back when they first got accepted. Prompted him to trigger an alarm, and he snapped that he couldn't help it. Sacred was Sasha's clan to him. Kwa shot back that they admired Sasha too and she totally got why he had those nerves. Matt confessed he'd felt the same way, and Tenna nodded along, proclaiming with pure excitement that it was only a countdown now until they finally climbed into S-Rank 2. Kwa snapped into action and smacked the boy right away, demanding to know what ridiculous nonsense he thought he was talking. Their bickering finally erupted into silence the moment someone barged into the guild. The receptionist greeted Heiss with a bright smile and praised his work, and the second Roland heard the name, he snapped his head around. Could this be the Avatar of Darkness, that legendary solo S-Rank adventurer? Roland's excitement curdled into panic the second he locked eyes with Heiss, because when Heiss spotted his staring, confusion flashed on his face. Roland freaked out, blurted an apology, and then Heiss slammed a bunch of items onto the counter. Recovered equipment from the iron metal goblin he just defeated, and he demanded they be handed back to the friends and family of their original owners. Then when the receptionist said the stuff was his now, he just shrugged it off, saying he didn't need it at all, while Roland, lurking behind, froze at Heiss's shockingly thoughtful side. Then the Heiss team tossed in the goblin materials too, and Roland's jaw dropped when he realized they'd been taken from an A-rank goblin. Right nearby, Guild Master Geist snapped, "Heist!" and called him over to tell him the royal family had demanded every S-rank adventurer, so Heist had to go too, no excuses. Geist even said he could drop the materials with the guild for processing, and Heist agreed, then headed out. The 1,000-man team stayed stuck in stunned silence, sweating over how terrifying he was, while Tenna leaned close and whispered with awe, shocking the rest. Soon, in the grand council room, the king stormed in and wasted no time, laying into a room packed with the most powerful people alive. At the gathering stood the barbarian clan master, Jonathan, the S-class legend Fighting Mother Mamacha, and the Judgment clan master, Chaos. The king snapped and said that, for reasons nobody could pin down, B-class monsters were multiplying at a terrifying, explosive speed. In that high-level dungeon just outside the royal capital, the very one he'd already cracked before, fresh footsteps weren't the problem. People kept vanishing left and right, shoving him into immediate action. Up on the higher floors of this dungeon, where things start getting dangerous, shocking signs of an incoming stampede were spotted. Every single person in that room froze in pure shock. A stampede, where the dungeon bosses crank out monsters in a wild frenzy, turns into the kind of disaster that sends those overflowing horrors stampeding straight into nearby towns and villages to attack on sight. When the king pressed for details, Geist snapped that now the dungeon was open to everyone. The boss monster would surely crawl out on the 60th floor, yet that tyrant bomber had already started showing its teeth as early as the 10th. And it got worse. Monsters meant for the 40th to 50th floors started crawling in way earlier, wiping out the early floor threats completely. With the way these monsters are moving, they'll likely start closing in on the royal capital fast. Chaos demanded a number, and Geist said, 30 years ago an intermediate-level dungeon sparked a stampede, where about 20,000 monsters suddenly stormed in and swallowed the whole region. 3 towns inside Highbelk got obliterated, and 7 more villages were erased from the map. But this wasn't just any dungeon, it was the highest tier, and Geist admitted it was nearly impossible to even guess how bad things could get. There was exactly one way to stop a stampede: wipe every last monster that slipped out. No survivors, extermination only. Jonathan snapped with irritation as Mamacha admitted it was worse than anyone wanted to believe. Then the king drifted into a hard, silent thought and ordered Geist. Geist hurried straight to the neighboring countries' adventurers' guilds to call in help, then carried the order out on the spot. The king snapped an order to Bonnet, then Bonnet didn't even blink as he took command and got the troops ready. The king slammed the truth into everyone's ears. This crisis was unlike anything their nation had ever seen, and if they didn't stand together right now, the whole country would collapse. Their last shred of hope clung to the adventurers' hands. Even after hearing something that heavy, Sasha and Heist didn't flinch, they stayed stone calm. Mamacha watched the disaster's scale stay a mystery and snapped that the clans had to lock in way tighter. Jonathan nodded hard, saying everyone needed to team up and get ready for the stampede coming for them. After a brief hesitation, Sasha asked Chaos if they could step into the dungeon early and take down the boss waiting at the very bottom, but Chaos shut the idea down cold, so Sasha snapped back, "How do you even know without trying?" Chaos finally laid it out. Since she just hit S-rank, she probably didn't realize the monster difficulty jumps up by a full rank every few floors the deeper you go. Anyone who tried to reach the bottom would get turned into monster food before they even got close. That's when Chaos snapped his focus to Heiss, promising to answer whatever questions he had, until Heiss suddenly stood up, marched out of the room, and vanished. Chaos lunged forward and yelled, begging to know where he was going, but Heiss didn't even spare him a glance. The king erupted into laughter on sight, grinning that Heiss was still just as entertaining as ever, while Princess Mewing, watching him storm off, curled her lips and muttered that he was just as rude as always. Sasha, just as stunned, let her thoughts whisper heist, and panic tightened hard in her chest. 10 days tore by since the counter-stampede meeting and the bombshell hit the public. The stampede was coming and everyone finally knew it. And just like that, the Adventurers Guild slammed the brakes on every single request. As the investigation deepened, the truth clicked into place. This stampede was going to hit within the next few days. The king yanked his knights together, gearing them up for the battle that was about to hit. Meanwhile, the townspeople panicked and sprinted to safer ground, while everyone else locked in, training non-stop and stitching their armies together for the threat that was about to break. Geist, the guild master, was ready too, and Sasha snapped into action with her own gear. Finally, the day of the stampede tore into reality. At the inn, Heiss shoved the payment into the old man's hands and pressed him. Was he really planning to flee the royal capital? The old man went stone still for a beat, then fell quiet. Before he even got to the part about what happened 30 years ago, a stampede had torn through his village, and Heiss nearly choked on the shock of it. The old man pressed on, swearing he'd seen the tragedy with his own eyes. His daughter and her husband had only dared to dream of opening an inn in the capital. He'd been there too, finalizing the inn purchase, and that's the one reason he lived while everything else fell apart. In the village he'd called home, his whole life just disappeared, gone without a trace. They searched everywhere, but his daughter, his son-in-law, and even his grandchild, none of them were ever found. Alone, left standing, he swore his life to guard this place and shield the dream his daughter once held, right up to the last breath, as tears poured down the old man's face. The whole heist went quiet for a split second, then, out of nowhere, he dumped even more coins onto the counter. The old man said Heiss had already paid for breakfast, and when Heiss corrected him, he admitted that the extra money was for the room he'd sleep in that very night. Later, right outside the royal capital, the atmosphere turned bleak. About 70,000 monsters had been spotted closing in. Geist watched them surge toward the capital and barked, "Stop this horde right here, no matter what, because we have to protect the people's land and their homes." Right as they were moving, a report crackled that stampede monsters were closing in from about 5 kilometers out, 80,000, and maybe even 100,000 monsters strong. The whole group froze, mouths shut. Sasha ground her teeth hard. One man, shaking so violently he could barely breathe, blurted out how anyone was supposed to survive odds like that. And then, straight through the panic, someone snapped, "Back up, stay back." Without a single warning, Heiss exploded off the high walls, slamming into the ground with a roiling cloud of dust, and the whole band of soldiers and adventurers froze, shock hitting them hard as they watched him land. Heiss shot his hands up, and boom, massive guns formed in both palms as if by magic. He gritted his teeth and muttered under his breath as he yanked the triggers. Then a ferocious burst of bullets tore through the air straight at the monsters charging forward. Wherever they hit, the world detonated in massive explosions, and the heist team kept blasting non-stop. Then ripped away the weapon and swapped again. Monsters crumpled in wave after wave, each blast landing dead-on like it knew exactly where to break them. His guns blazed non-stop, and a choking wall of smoke swarmed around him. Sasha crept up from behind, frozen by the brutal spectacle, staring at Heist's terrifying skill like she couldn't believe her eyes. Reynolds stood beside her, realizing just how much destruction was about to rain down, while up high a giant bird wheeled in the sky, its razor-sharp gaze locking onto every move on the battlefield. Geist, who'd been motionless up until now, snapped his eyes open and ordered his long-range forces to unleash the attack. In a flash, the archers unleashed a storm of arrows that punched straight through the monsters, and from above, Crane smirked like he'd been waiting for this. Then his eyes slid down until they locked onto Sasha. He knew her, and the thought hit him hard. She better not get killed by those monsters before he gets the chance to do it himself. His eyes snapped back the moment he spotted Heiss's weapons, and he couldn't help but feel underwhelmed, because the fight was way less chaotic than he'd been bracing for. Kid was wrecking every single one of his plans. Geist barked orders to his front line, prepare, then advance, betting everything on them, and the other adventurers exploded forward the moment the command hit. A hulking monster came charging at them, and Mamacha split it clean in half before it could even reach them, whose power let her balloon her body to any size she wanted. She kept going, fighting like a force of nature, roaring at everyone to hold strong. Then behind her, another monster lunged in for a deadly strike. Jonathan's vibration ability cut through it, and he ended it in the blink of an eye. Then he snapped at Mamacha to shield herself better, because the very next moment, more blades tore out of the air and shredded the other monsters too. Chaos tightened his grip on poison-coated knives and grinned as he scanned the battlefield, deciding these creatures were tough enough to keep things interesting, while Heist still stood frozen at the front, motionless. He suddenly felt someone closing in, so he snapped into motion, dodging just as the attack slammed the ground and blew it apart. Right there, Crane showed up with a smirk, amazed that Heist had actually managed to slip out of it. Heist demanded to know who Crane really was, then Crane snapped back that he was the one who kicked off the whole stampede. The moment Heist clocked Crane's face, his gut told him this had to be the demon Sasha warned about, so Crane snapped back, pressing why Heist was even tied to that woman, and Heist finally stayed silent, leaving Crane to wonder what he really knew. Crane brushed it off, then swore that anything the woman cherished would be shattered by his hands, and Heist just muttered, stunned and not buying a word of it. Crane kept talking. Heist had shoved himself into his path, so Crane didn't just show up, he came straight to erase him, and the fact that Heist only knew her made the whole thing even more delicious. Crane flashed a vicious grin and launched himself forward out of nowhere, smashing the attack straight into Heist before he could even react. Sasha spotted the movement on the battlefield, spun toward it and froze at what she saw, Heist wiping blood off his face like it meant nothing and Crane's back giving everything away. "It's him! Go after the demon!" She shouted at Reynolds, but right as they tried to move, a goblin lunged straight for her. Right around them, goblins erupted out of nowhere and swarmed the whole area, trapping them and cutting off every path forward. She knew they couldn't move a step in this chaos. Suddenly, the ground started bucking and shuddering like it was alive. Geist cried out in panic, begging to know what was causing the tremors. Then, without warning, the earth caved in and split wide open. Adventurers shrieked and pointed as something colossal burst up from the ground. Right on cue, the giant turtle thundered its roar and Reynolds snapped, "Sasha!" to yank her gaze toward it. Sasha flicked her eyes to the brutal clash between Heist and the demon, and then rage flared. She clenched her fist tight. She spun around and bolted straight at the giant turtle with Reynolds, certain they had to wipe it out, while in the back of her mind she decided Heist would deal with the demon. At the same time, Crane needled Heist, laughing at how all his allies had ditched him. Heist snapped his gun up and blasted right away, yanking Crane to a stop. Then Crane summoned wind and slammed it into the bullet's path so it fizzled harmlessly as they both crashed down to the ground. Crane scoffed at Heist's smarts, saying that if Heist truly had a report on him, he'd already know how brutally powerful Crane's wind ability is out here in the open. So Heist snapped in frustration, clicked his tongue and called up a whole new weapon. With a lightning-fast snap, he sprayed the demon with another storm of bullets, but every shot missed, leaving nothing to land, and Crane just roared with laughter at the sheer futility. Heist ripped through his loadout again, switched weapons on the fly, then blasted the shot. But again, a brutal wall of wind slammed into the bullet and stopped it cold before it could hit. As the swirling barrier finally faded, Crane realized Heist's mysterious power was a brutal bad match for him. He basically said, "All that firepower in the world means nothing if you can't land even one hit." Crane snapped back with a blast of wind, and as Heist staggered, Crane taunted him, pressing him, so what was he going to do next? Heist snapped his aim up at Crane and pulled the trigger, but the bullets got gulped up by the wind again like they never stood a chance. He studied the chaos, telling himself that if he could just crack Crane's wind, maybe he'd still have a shot. Then a hand settled on his shoulder. Persia slipped up beside him and hissed that she'd handle it, then told him, just like always, to steady his weapon and keep his focus. Heist caught her resolve and smirked, then he pulled out yet another weapon. Then he aimed it straight at Crane. Crane clocked the sudden shift in their behavior and blurted out, completely thrown, "What's going on?" He doubled down, swearing that with his wind barrier humming, nothing Heist tried could ever slip through, only for Heist to snap back that even so, he couldn't pull it off by himself. Prycia suddenly shot forward, twisting the air around Heist's gun, and a brutal blast ripped out, so strong Crane's eyes went wide. He couldn't even wrap his head around where she'd come from. The bullet slammed into his wind barrier, held for a heartbeat, then tore it open as the shot surged even harder. Crane snapped to attention in pure disbelief. Because they weren't just fighting his wind, they were weaponizing the very air to rip it apart and cancel it out. He tried to launch a counter, but the bullet hit him square in the head before he even moved, and as shock froze him, one last thought burned through. How could a mere human do this to him? His body crumpled to the ground, frozen in place, and Heist stayed there for a few heartbeats before he finally let out a quiet, grateful nod. Percy had saved him. With a grin, the amused Percy said he could repay her by taking her out for tea later. Sasha brought up the restaurant she'd just found, but Heist snapped back, accusing her of doing nothing but eating. Then a scream tore through the air. "Sasha!" And they both spun toward the voice. There, Sasha stood trembling as blood streamed down her body, scars piled across her, yet she refused to bow, staring down those massive monsters like they had no chance. Geist blasted the message through the bird's cry. There was a fresh stampede monster on the loose, and it was ridiculously, terrifyingly powerful. They named it the King Turtle, an SS plus monster, and that was the moment everything tipped. Adventurers were told straight up to dig in and not budge. No hesitation, Sasha came barreling at the massive creature like it was the only thing in her way. She shot into the air and whipped her sword through the sky in one razor-quick swing. But it didn't even shake the thing. Her blade just skidded and bounced off that monster's brutal, thick shell, and the truth hit hard: no direct strike would ever break it. Suddenly, the King Turtle lashed out with a brutal strike, but Sasha snapped out of the way just in time, yet Reynolds saw the opening and instantly clocked her weakness. Ever since the King Turtle showed up, the adventurers got shoved back again and again, and if that push keeps rolling, the monsters are going to crash right through the city walls. Goblin lunged from behind and smashed Sasha, and she gasped in sharp pain as monsters closed in on her from every side. Then a goblin lifted its weapon to end it, and Reynolds lunged to stop it, but a towering monster slammed into his path. Right when the goblin lunged with its swing, the bullet tore right through its arm. Right after that, the giant turtle let out a thunderous roar, and a glowing orb started forming in its mouth, swelling fast like a countdown. Reynolds snapped to action, rushing straight to Sasha's side. The monster slammed into him, and he barely raised his guard in time, eyes snapping to Sasha, who stood frozen right in front of that towering nightmare. A savage blast tore out of the King Turtle's mouth and slammed toward Sasha like a doomed train. She tensed, praying this wasn't the end. Then the attack swallowed her whole, and when the smoke finally cleared, Sasha froze when she saw Heist step in front of her, blocking the deadly blast with his own body. His eyes stayed shut, his body torn up with wounds, and he was hanging on by a thread. Sasha snatched him before he hit the ground, then stared at him, stunned. Why would he gamble his life just to shield her? Heist, shaking so hard he could barely get words out, blurted that his body had moved on its own. Sasha's thoughts spun as she watched him grapple, her shock cracking into tears because all she could see was their shared dream, building the best adventurer team of all. Even battered and drained, Heist still shoved her forward like he refused to let hope die. She deconvinced herself she couldn't beat the King Turtle, but the fire in Heist's belief lit a way through her fear. When she stared down even a slime, those childhood memories came crashing back, and Heist had pushed her to strike without even a second of hesitation. With grit hardening in her chest, Sasha rose, snatched her sword, and felt her fighting spirit ignite like fire. Golden determination filter. Rallying every ounce of strength, she barreled back into the battlefield, and in the blink of an eye carved through a horde of monsters. Reynolds couldn't even process how fast and ruthless her strikes were. Mamacha felt Sasha's power explode with a shocking surge, and she couldn't help but wonder if this was the awakening they always talked about. Jonathan nodded right along, agreeing. In the rarest of rare cases, a person snapping out of a mental crisis could suddenly level up their abilities to an unbelievable, mind-bending degree. It was the kind of thing people only whispered about in rumors, until now when it hit right in front of their eyes, because a massive explosion tore across the battlefield, rattling the ground and screaming that this fight still had a lot of fight left in it. Sasha sprang high over the colossal monster, her blade blazing with brilliant light, and with a single savage swing she cleaved straight through the creature's tough body in an instant. Blood erupted from the wound as the giant roared in agony, then crumpled to the ground. Sasha's resolve flared like wildfire as she braced for the next wave, vowing that not a single monster would slip past her blade. Heist watched from afar, a thin smile tugging at his lips as he tracked her brutal fight. Then his eyes drifted downward and consciousness finally snapped back. He jolted awake inside a strange room, staring around like, wait, am I really at the inn? Rosia appeared. And when Heis finally got it, he understood she'd brought him there with help from the spirits. Then she bandaged him with quick first aid until he realized the stampede was over and nothing went wrong. Heis demanded to know how Sasha was doing, but before Perseus could even answer, Sasha stormed into the room on her own. The two women suddenly stalled in place, trading shocked looks like, wait, did we just see that? Before Persia slipped away to fetch water, Sasha and Heis Salon were left alone. Sasha checked Heis's injuries and found they were minor, even as he winced and admitted it hurt. Then a tense silence slammed into the air. Sasha's words of regret crushed him, because everything that had happened finally hit like a breaking wave. Heis told her straight from the heart that he made the move on his own, so none of the blame would ever land on her, and then he leaned in as he talked about Sasha's brand new awakening of her power. It pushed her one step closer to finally making her dreams come true. Sasha froze in shock as she realized exactly who he was. And with shaky hands, she pleaded for him to come back to the sacred. Perseus burst back in and snapped that Heis couldn't take part. Then the two women ignited into a furious argument. Sasha insisted Heis started out on her team, but Perseus snapped that he'd been kicked out. Then Heis stepped in to stop the fight. He declared he didn't need a team anymore and was dead set on blazing his path alone. Both women froze at his decision. Persia owned up and told Sasha this mess was partly her fault, and Sasha snapped back, demanding answers about what's going on between Persia and Heis. Persia then confessed they're sworn and fated to end up together, and Sasha practically choked on the revelation. Meanwhile, Heis stood there, locking onto the noise and the crushing tension. Even though it was a lot to take in, the overload somehow didn't feel totally awful. Two women pressed him at the exact same time, grilling him on his future team plans. But Heist cut through the noise and declared, cold and certain, that he'd keep going solo, blazing his way forward alone.